Welcome back to 28 Days and Beyond.
Where we talk about our history, our heritage, and our culture.
I'm Amari.
I'm Charisma.
Hello.
Hi.
What's going on?
Life.
Yeah.
Stuff.
That's what's up.
How are you?
Thank you.
Because I got in trouble.
I'll be fishing. But
I got in trouble last time that I didn't ask.
Well,
so how are you, Amari?
I'm doing very well. I'm splendid. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Yes. Splendid. That's exactly. Specificity with language is important.
I like where you're going.
Yeah. So speaking of what's the word? Exactly.
Yeah.
Speaking of specificity with language, we're also talking about specificity with thought today. Okay. Follow me for a second. Follow me. Okay. It's not only language and thought, but it's also vision.
Okay.
Black people have been in this country since this country was a country.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Accurate.
As you hear, people talking, we built this country.
We did.
Having been here for several centuries, I've got to say, it hasn't really been working out too well.
That's the understatement of this century. Yeah.
Now, we're often taught, you got to keep fighting to be, because America can change and America can be the America it was always supposed to be. Mm-hmm. Right? You can make America great again. Right?
That's debatable. Continue.
I'm asking about the prospects for Black people in this country. Let's be real. This is a conversation we don't see too often, right?
Yeah, that's true. We don't.
Are there other options available to us? Like what are
I mean, as far as being in this country or just
maybe
options?
Anything.
I mean, it's a great big world, right?
Yeah.
And so the beauty of a passport is that you can travel and you can find where you feel like you fit. Mm-hmm. I totally understand your point of, feeling misplaced or feeling like you don't belong, especially when so much of this society and this culture makes Black people feel like they don't belong. So I totally understand that. But I wouldn't shy away from the notion of, okay, there are other options if you're not happy here, if you don't feel like we're progressing enough, if you don't feel like we're advancing enough, if you don't feel like there are enough opportunities here for us to grow and to get past so much of this sordid history that our country has been built on, then do what you gotta do. Word up.
We see statistics of rising numbers of what they call expats, right? People who are moving to places, whether it be in the Caribbean, whether it be to Europe.
I feel like that's my tribe, but continue.
Oh, word?
Yeah.
Well, tell us more about it.
Well, since I was a kid, I've always been one of those people that just loves to travel. Like the idea of going someplace where you don't know anyone, you don't necessarily speak the language, and just having to find new ways to communicate with complete strangers and connecting with complete strangers has always been so fascinating to me. And you get to try different foods and you get to hear different musics and just bond.
But it's one thing to be like, I'm going to go away for 2 weeks. It's another thing to be like, I'm going to recreate my life somewhere else.
I'm totally with it though.
Really?
Like I could pack up tomorrow and go live someplace for...
And go where? Paris, let me guess.
I've been to Paris.
And?
A few times.
And?
I enjoyed it. You'll never have a better croissant anywhere in the world.
I mean, yeah, but they don't exactly treat Black people very well over there either.
Well, that's true, but my personal experience has not been that. I've been welcomed because the thing that a lot of people don't talk about with Paris is how many people are coming there from other places.
Yeah.
The trip that I went on to Morocco, I met someone when I was in Paris that was originally from Morocco, forged a friendship, and that's how that trip came to be. But there were people from all over the world there, much like here. But yeah, I don't know.
I'm skeptical about France for its long history of human rights violations as regards to African people.
Hey, I'm with you.
But today we'll be talking about some of these issues, but
yes.
Really just speaking more about the prospects of Black people in this country with Aaron and Trey, who are two activists at Villanova University.
Awesome.
When we come back on 28 Days and Beyond. Welcome back to 28 Days and Beyond. We are joined now by Aaron and Trey, who are two students at Villanova University. Thanks for joining us, fellas.
Thank you for having me.
So you had an experience recently that has kind of sparked some new thoughts and new ideas. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
About 2 weeks ago, when Diane Nash, civil rights activist, came and spoke to Villanova just about nonviolent protests and just her experiences during the civil rights movement. And afterwards, we had the opportunity to talk to her about one of the things she said during her talk. And what she said was that if Black people cannot find support amongst people in positions of authority, that they must do things amongst themselves and thus find a place for themselves to do those things. And that kind of sparked a whole conversation of itself about finding a new place for African Americans to.
So practically, what does that look like?
Well, I think first, the first thing we need to do would be compile all of our resources in our capital. I think one of the problems right now that's plaguing African American communities is Black businesses. They generate revenue, but they only employ 4% of the African American working population. Mm-hmm. So I think if we were able to think of more ways to recirculate capital within the Black community, I think that would be the first step, just in order for us to have the means to be able to do these things, gain that independence that we think we deserve. Mm-hmm. So I think that would be the first thing. She talked about not only economic means, but we'd also need a political aid or a machine, something that was independent, that we could that could fuel and mobilize large groups of African Americans to get these objectives and get these things done, which in turn will just revitalize Black communities, and eventually we should be able to have our own area, or if that's not domestically, somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Why do you see that as a necessity, our own area, whether it be domestically or elsewhere?
Well, for one thing, I think racism is just so entrenched in our society. I mean, it's in pretty much every facet of life at this point, and so now that it's in our policies, I just think it's almost to the point where I don't think that we can really thrive like we should be able to here. You want to speak on that?
And not to say that Black people and white people can't be here. We just can't be here peacefully and as equals. Time and time again, African Americans have, and people of color in general, have just encountered oppression after oppression, despite however many strides we may make as a people. We elected Barack Obama as the 44th president of the United States, the first African American president, and the next president after him was not of the same caliber. So we just took a large step forward in order to go back so many steps. Yeah. And it again happened again in Reconstruction time. So this cycle that continues to just oppress and bring us back into diluted harmony, I would say, is just going to continue unless we take ourselves out of that cycle. And whether it be here or abroad, it all depends on how we can come together and decide as a group to get as a community.
So obviously that would be a long-term vision, right? If we were to move somewhere, but in the immediate, what are some ways that we can go about preparing towards, if not, that physical separation, at least some form of autonomy or independence?
Well, for me, I'm really interested in economics. So for me, it would be finding modern ways of cooperative economics, mm-hmm. Whether that's through community strongholds like a grocery store, or and reinvesting into Black banks. I think that if we were able to compile our resources and then recirculate that, back into schools, back into local hospitals, create things like Diane Nash talked to us about, creating a Black Boy Scouts program, which would just have long-term positive outcomes for those children. So if we could just start creating programs here in our own communities, putting more Black businesses in these Black communities as well, to keep the funds there. I think things like that would be really advantageous to us.
Just support in general of there are a lot of Black entrepreneurs, Black everything, Black people capable of a lot of things. So we need to support those things that are already out there and just foster general community amongst ourselves. Every other group of people does it. Black people are the only group of people who seem to be lacking in that category. So it's just more general support amongst ourselves rather than pushing ourselves down.
And that's an interesting point. I know there's a lot more to that. So after the break, I'd like to pick up right from there. We'll be back with more 28 Days and Beyond. We're back on 28 Days and Beyond. So before the break, you were talking about, every other group seems to be able to come together, and Black folks struggle in that area. What do you see as some of those barriers?
It's how Black people view each other, how we view our blackness. Because in the media, we're taught to hate our blackness. It's a target. Recent police brutality and ongoing police brutality. It's just a mentality that has been ingrained since slavery, that darker skin is something that's not appropriate. So that has been pushed on us so much that we do it to ourselves. You hear about black on black crime all the time. Black people taking advantage of other black people because we can't identify with each other because we hate the blackness.
You know, and the reason I ask is because of the very things you're talking about. We hear about black on black crime. We hear about, and we know that statistically, black people don't kill black people at any higher rates than white people kill white people, right? Because, you know, you generally are violent against those who live in your proximity. It's projected, obviously, you know, that there's this big crisis to call black on black crime or whatever. So part of the barrier, you know, may also be the role, like you said, that the media plays in this sort of thing. But I'm sitting here listening to you gentlemen, and I'm trying to think about what a viewer might be thinking. Oh, they're talking about separatism. You know, this is what we've been fighting against all of this time. Well, what do you say to somebody who would say something like that?
I would say that separation isn't always a bad thing. People like to think like, yeah, this is what new level segregation, well, it's separate but equal, if we want to, like, just to use those terms. But we've been fighting for this togetherness and unity with white people for so long, and frankly, we've been unsuccessful. There have been great strides. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, every other civil rights activist has given their lives to foster a sort of equality amongst white people. They've come so far, and there's still much more to go. And my question is, how far do we have to go? Instead of just keep pushing and pushing for the next 400 years, like for the past 400 years that we've been doing, why not just take ourselves out of the equation? And again, this is not me trying to sound racist or separatist. This is me realizing that certain things aren't possible, and the world isn't as beautiful as people wanted to paint it out to be. So,
you know, the consequence of, you know, some racial harmony has always been black people's well-being. We're the ones who always have to make a sacrifice in the name of racial harmony. We have to give up our identity. We have to give up our, you know, proximity to our neighbors. We have to aspire towards this, you know, mystical whiteness. But do you think that this is something that, you know, a majority of black people would really take to?
I think with the right leadership, I think people would be able to take to it. That's one of the things that we talked to Diane Nash about as well. There needs to be a unified voice. I mean, we're talking about black on black crime and things like that. Like, these are things that only break our communities apart. We need to have a unifying voice with strong leadership capabilities that's able to unite mass amounts of people, and then like teach them not ideology, but just show them what's going on, show them like what we're capable of as a community. I mean, we have doctors, we have lawyers, we have engineers, we have everything we need to have a successful and sustainable society. It's just a matter of us unifying ourselves and actually getting it done.
I think, you know, I mean, it seems there's a very practical element of it. You know, we need to be able to look to people who we can trust, you know, trust that they have our best interests in mind. But again, you know, practically, I think that there are obviously a million directions that this could begin with. For you, what would be the first step?
It's got to start with the economics of the situation. We live in a very capitalistic world, and money makes the world go round. So you got to start with that in order to make an concrete impact. Trey talked about a political machine earlier, and that's only going to be able to do what it should do with the money that it has. So it's got to start with that. Like, there's got to be a revenue for it first.
That's it. Well, gentlemen, we thank you for joining us here on 28 Days and Beyond. I really look forward to seeing how your ideas develop.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for letting me out.
Thanks for having us.
That's what's up. We'll be back with more 28 Days and Beyond.
Welcome back to 28 Days and Beyond. Well, I was listening to that awesome conversation you had with those young kings. What did you take away from what they had to say?
You know, I kept hearing this Malcolm X quote in my head. I'm always hearing Malcolm X quotes, though, because he had all the answers. But he said something. He said, there can be no black-white unity until there's first some black unity. We cannot be deemed as acceptable to others until we have first been deemed acceptable to ourselves, right?
That's a really powerful quote.
I mean, the reason I'm saying that is because, and I know Aaron was saying, you know, I don't want to be seen as racist, but we're the only group of people, when we talk about coming together and doing for ourselves in the context, in the historical and contemporary context of a society, that has not done for us.
That feel like they have to give that disclaimer.
Exactly, right? And we're seen as racist, we're seen as separatists, we're seen as whatever.
You even see it in entertainment. Like, I don't know if you've peeped this, but a lot of times if there's like an all-black cast or anything like that, it's like, where's the diversity?
Yeah.
And it's like, so everybody else can have movies where it's just one group of people being celebrated and it's not a problem, but the moment that we do it, everyone wants to scream diversity. So I agree with you.
And exactly, you talk about the Black Panther, right? So that movie's not diverse, but you've got a cast of black people from, you know, from the United States, from England, from Guyana, from various parts of the African continent, that there's other forms of diversity. And I think just as well that black people can or need to come together in terms of pooling our own resources, because again, we are the only ones who have our best interests at heart.
But do you think that we'll ever get to that point? Because so often, unfortunately, I've heard echoes of, well, I'm gonna do what's good for me, kind of deal. Where, and that being said, you know, right after someone says something about us unifying and coming together, even with things as far as the protests, you've had people saying, well, I'm going to do what I want to do.
Word.
So do you think that we can ever actually get to that point where we're a united front?
I don't think any group is a united front altogether, but I also think that it's not like we have to get somewhere. I think that's already here amongst us. We've been talking about Black Panther this whole show, but why is there so much excitement around it?
Because we haven't seen it.
Because they haven't seen it. It helps us imagine a place where we are in control of our own destiny, right?
And seeing, because that was another thing, because I'm not going to give any spoilers away.
Please don't, because, you know, the rest of us will leave.
But one of the things that I heard people saying, and saying with pride, was that here you have this group of people from this sovereign nation, and there's a regalness, there's intelligence, there's none of the stereotypes that are usually paired with Black and brown folks. We don't get any of that. You just get us existing, being regal, being who we are, and being firm in who we are. And that is why I think people are celebrating as much as they are.
But I also have to say, I don't think we have to go to a fictional movie to find that reality. Yo, I'll be driving through West Philly, the way some of these folks carry themselves, right? In the face of having, you know, very little in terms of material things, they've got a sense of self. They've got a sense of pride in who they are. You know what I'm saying? They carry themselves as if the world belongs to them. So I think it already exists. It's a matter of us building the formal infrastructure to facilitate that. I will never say that, you know, Black people are hopeless, and I can never say that we're in a position to, right? I mean, we've got power. There's a Yoruba proverb that says, as long as there's life, there's hope. And if we've shown that we can do anything, is that we can survive. Right? And now I think our job is to make the transition from surviving to actually living.
Yeah, and one of the other things you spoke about here was this idea of us separating and kind of, you know, doing our own thing. While I understand people thinking that might be a solution, I also don't want to discredit what you just said with the fact that there is enough that's happening here and enough people here that are of the same mindset that we can make progress. And we can do that without exiting.
But before we go, I have to say that we can build ourselves up to the point where we are ready to exit. This has been another episode of 28 Days and Beyond,
where we talk about our history, our heritage, and our culture. We'll see you next time.